Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another episode of the Stokes Sound Podcast. I'm your host, Ed Stokes, and joined with me today, all the way up in Manchester, is mixer Josh Riley. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, mate. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Josh, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. It's a real pleasure to have
it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Great mixers like yourself and stuff. But before we kind of get into it, just for our audience, if you want to give yourself a little introduction, just a little bit about you.
Yeah.
And all of that sort of great stuff.
Yeah. So again, you've given my name, Josh. I am a mixer based here in Manchester, originally from Cape Town, South Africa, which we were discussing whether I am Australian or South African. But yeah, I am South African, originally half British. So my wife and I, we recently moved up to Manchester last year, March. And I've been a studio mixer for about 4 years now, but previously was in the live sound industry, doing a lot of freelance work in that. I studied audio production at SAE down in Cape Town. And I was very much into music growing up, played instruments, sang, wanted to do something with music with my life, but didn't necessarily want to study like actual music. Found that I really loved the technical side. Just growing up doing that, I did like a lot of my knowledge volunteering at church and then also working as a freelance engineer. That's where I got a lot of my knowledge. Studied, thought I'd be in the live sound industry, and really fell in love with the studio world. And just with a lot of like the guest lecturers there really inspired me to, I just saw another side of the other side of the music industry. Amazing. I was like, I want to do this. And finished my studies, didn't really know what I wanted to do, how it was going to work necessarily. So I went into lecturing for a bit, lecturing audio production at another college. And then on the side was basically living with my parents at the time. On the side, started saving up and just buying gear on the side, and, started posting, thought of like a company name, studio name, started doing like a little bit of social media stuff. And people started coming and hiring me. So I thought, okay, this seems to be going good, and really just decided March 2022 actually to go full time into it, and pretty much actually started out. I know a lot of people have different various journeys, either working in a studio as an intern and or as an assistant and everything, and then working their way up, doing many different things from recording to producing, and then kind of finding their niche. I was really pretty much mixing from a live sound perspective. And so went pretty much straight into mixing, like niche down. I was doing many different genres, but it eventually just started going into pop. And my journey is a little different from what you would mostly think is just being like, working your way up through the studio world. I just started mixing for people. People started hiring me, decided to go full time. And so that's where I am right now. We moved to the UK, which was a bit of a business reset. Although we will get into it about being online and everything, it is still coming to a new country. You're new. You don't know anyone, and so where do you go from there? So that's my journey.
It's a big thing you've done. Not everyone can just move. Well, first of all, being in the music industry, as you know, is difficult as it is, and then on top of that, moving, to another country to, like you say, start business again. We will get into that within the podcast, because this podcast, for all the people listening, we're going to talk about kind of content creation, mixing kind of full time, and also your kind of mix process as well. And I've heard your mixes, and I absolutely love them. But can we just talk a little bit about kind of your setup at the moment in your place? Where are you mixing? What are you mixing on your DAW? And then we can go from there. That would be amazing.
So I'm actually mixing in the second room of our small apartment here in Manchester. I previously, before we moved, I was mixing in a bedroom. I was working out of a bedroom that we renovated at my parents' house. And so I would just go there during the day. So this is like an L-shaped kind of room. You can see the back there, and then I've got a big window in front of me here. And
I saw that you got a big window. That's amazing. It's to have some daylight in.
It's got a good view, but if anyone knows the UK, Manchester weather is not the most consistent. So there's days where it looks great, and there's days where I'm just like, I just got to sit in front of rain and watch
Depressing.
But yeah, so it's a very small room. Finished up this build like last year, November, early December. So what my setup is, literally just got a TV in front of me. I'm mixing on some Amphion 118s.
Love it.
Literally running through a Apollo Twinix and got a 2 Avid S1s using Pro Tools as my main DAW. And yeah, pretty much got like these big gobos. You can see 2 of them back there.
Yeah, I was going to ask. I saw something on your Instagram. You built something. I was like, that is genius.
I would not recommend doing it in an apartment. Build it elsewhere and transport it in. I did this all in our living room, which was just, thankfully my wife was away for the week. She was away for business. Otherwise she would have killed me. It was not fun. I almost like got ill just because of how physically I built this kind of same setup in my old studio.
Yeah.
And then I was like, do I build? And I was like, no, I'm going to build again. And just realize again how much of an absolute mission it is. So yeah, we've got those panels there. I've pretty much got 5 of them. Got 2 on the side reflections as well. And then a cloud as well. And one of the challenges that I wanted to do, because working around with like landlords and stuff here in the UK can get a bit sticky, as we found out. So I was like, how can I get a cloud up? Because a cloud is pretty important in a setup. How can I get that up without drilling into the roof? So I came up with this idea of building like this wooden frame, basically what you would find behind the wall, bring it in and just kind of hide it behind these panels here. And so I built this frame and it's hanging off this big, thick, heavy cloud. Hasn't fallen down yet, so I think I've done a good job.
I was going to say, I saw the video. For all the listeners listening, you got to go and check out his Instagram. There's a video, and I saw it, and I was thinking to myself, you had this like chair, and you were putting it in the middle, and you were balancing, and I was like, this could go horribly wrong.
Yeah,
but it didn't.
We'll get in that with content, but my wife told me to wait till the evening to just help me put that up, and I was like, nah, it's still light. I need to film a video and get this up as a time lapse. Yeah. So I just decided to do it myself. I wouldn't recommend. It's very, very heavy, but we managed to get it up, and it's still up there. So
and it looks great, and makes the mixing that little bit easier having a good room. Yeah. Well, it makes a big difference.
So yeah, that's the setup. I'm very much a minimalist in everything: speakers, DAW, audio interface, acoustic treatment. That's it.
What about plugins? Are you minimal in that?
If we dive a bit deeper, I am very, very minimal in terms of what plugins I have and what plugins I use. I've always have been, but have shrunk it down a lot more now to just kind of use the essentials. And if I find something that is maybe where I'm lacking in terms of workflow, and there's something else that's out there that could be great, or maybe I want to buy myself a little treat here and there, on Black Friday, or someone comes out with a new thing, I'll assess it. Or maybe I'm using the same thing over and over again and I want something a little bit different. I'll maybe end up thinking of buying, but I'm usually using most of the same tools, and I'm very minimalistic on how I'm processing mixes. Just part of my philosophy. And yeah.
So as we're on that topic then of plugins and mixing, as I mentioned previously, we are going to get into the whole content creation and business side, but maybe let's touch upon your kind of workflow. Let's say I was an artist or a producer and I was sending you a track to mix. What's kind of your processing stages? Of course, every song is different, but there will be a few things that you kind of use a lot. Like I'm sure FabFilter Pro Q3 is one of them. Maybe it seems to be a lot of mixers' choice for cutting. But I'll let you talk through your process for our listeners. So we got a track. What's your kind of to-do list?
To kind of even just predate that, when I get a track to mix, I'm usually just hopping on the call with an artist and really just kind of just seeing what they're going for. And that's not just asking questions about the mix. I'm asking how music is going for them right now, what kind of period they are in their music journey, what role is the song playing in their in their journey, and they're like chatting about the story behind the song. what are their favorite parts? What things do they not like about the song, areas that we can kind of improve. And then sometimes I'm touching on reference mixes, but I'm not really doing reference mixes that much. I don't use that as a core kind of mixing tool, but really just to kind of get them to tell me about the song, and that really informs my decisions. I'm usually going a lot on like gut feeling, but if I have them kind of giving their feelings about the song, that informs me subconsciously when I'm there. I've written it down, but I really go back to the notes because I like to try and remember it as much as I can, and that informs my decision. And so when I'm mixing, when people send me stems, I'm like, whatever processing you have on there, send it. I take everything wet. If you got reverb on there, send it. I view it almost as like a relay race, whereas you've started the song, or if you're an artist and you're self-producer, you started the song, or you're a producer sending me a mix from an artist that you're working with, I view it as a relay race. That you started that race and you're kind of handing the baton over to me, and I'm taking that. I'm not going back to the start of the race and restarting it. So that's kind of my philosophy in terms of starting a mix. As for where to go, I'm just dropping it to the session and just having it, I'll set it up, have a listen to see what it needs. And I'm really not doing it. Really depends on the song and the production. There's times where you need to take a song, you need to add that 60%, and then there's times where you need to add that 5 to 10%. It really does depend.
Do you have a template? Are you mixing from a template?
Mixing from a template.
Yeah.
I recently changed it. I'm always trying to figure out, what am I doing over and over again that I can just kind of simplify and just put it into the template, that I don't need to do it again. I'm also utilizing SoundFlow. So I've got a Stream Deck on my S1s. Most of the time with Avid S1s, you see people put the iPads on top of them to kind of have like the meters and stuff, but you can run them without that, and it's a lot cheaper to not have two iPads.
Yeah, they're expensive to begin with.
The S1s themselves are pretty much, you got to take out a loan to grab them.
Like with all music, yeah.
Yeah. So you can run them without, and so they're great without the iPad. So I've got a little Stream Deck right in the middle of there, and that's running SoundFlow, which is an automation software for people that maybe don't know that. Check them out. Really great in just creating macros and bringing the amount of times that you click something down to like one button, and being able to automate workflows and stuff like that. So I can pull up plugins without having like to type it in Pro Tools, my track presets. It allows me also to like different things that I'm grabbing from Pro Tools, like Audio Sweep. I can grab them easily there, bouncing out mixes, switching between buffer sizes, slip and grid mode. Stuff like that is just really just at the touch of the button, where I don't have to grab my mouse and go find and click it somewhere as well. So so SoundFlow, that helps me set up my sessions, but I do have a template which has got pretty much all of my template. When you open it up, it's pretty much just all of my buses and my routing and my auxes and effects and everything. As for like individual channels, I have those as track presets. So when I'm dropping like your separates in, I'll obviously organize them and put them in their different places wherever they are. So usually start with, at the top of my system, drums, bass, or drums, percussion, bass, acoustic, electric, keys, vocals, backing vocals, and then to my mix bus.
Do you mix into your mix bus, or do you have mix bus processing on at the end, or do you have any at all?
I do have mix bus processing. I've got a couple of things on there. So with all of my tracks, so even on my buses, not necessarily on my buses, but my main mix bus, and like if I'm going on dropping my separates in, I've got on my Stream Deck, I've got presets, and I'll select all of like my drum tracks, hit presets, hit drums, and what it will do, it will color, it will route, and it will add all of my plugins that I generally use on drums. And for each instrument group, I can do that. Highlight them, hit that button, it routes, colors, and does all of that for me.
Yeah.
It's got all of I've just got them inactive, because if I'm not going to use them, I'll just leave them inactive, say some CPU. And then, mix bus is probably the only bus that I have processing on. I don't use any processing on any of the buses. I prefer if I find that with bus processing, I find I'd rather go to the source. If I feel like my drums are not having enough kick, yeah, we can talk. I use parallel compression and stuff like that. But if there's a specific issue in that specific instrument group, I'm going to go exactly to the source. So maybe my snare is not hitting. I'm not going to go to my drum bus and
boost up the frequency for snare.
I'm going to go to the actual snare. And then that informs me and allows me to be more in touch with what's going on in my mix. So if there is an issue, I know exactly where to find it. But for my mix bus, also pretty minimal as well. I'll get into like how minimal I am on specific channels and what I'm using. But my mix bus currently is Tone Project's Unison as my mix bus compressor. I recently bought the U80 Manly Verimue. I used it on the mix recently and I liked it. And I was like, yeah, let's use that as a kind of like a color option. Although the Tone Projects one it has like a color button on there. It's a bit more transparent. It's a bit more flexible. Whereas like the Manly it's got that sound and
more obvious.
Yeah,
you put it on. It
so those are my two mix bus. I don't use them at the same time. That could be cool to try, I guess. But
there's no rules.
The other, I'm using one or the other at the moment. I've done 2 mixes today that I've started working on. I've got the Tone Projects on. It's just the easiest one that I've been using for the past year. And then I've got Pro Q3 if I need it. If I just maybe need to feel like I've maybe gone a bit heavy in a specific area, then I can kind of notch or out slightly. But I'm that's like maybe 1 time out of 10 that I'm doing that. And
do you do any high pass or anything?
Pardon?
Do you do any high pass filtering or anything on the mix bus?
No. I'll do high pass on like individual channels. But nothing on the mix bus. I kind of leave that. I leave that pretty simple, and then it goes into standard clip by SIR Audio and FabFilter Pro L2 as well, which I'm just using really just for. I'm mixing into all of that, but I'm using that mainly for levels, just for reference mixes. People want to obviously hear they're sending me crushed reference mixes, and if I'm sending the mix softer, it's just the world we live in now. If I send it softer, they're going to be like, even though loudness it's not about loudness for them, it is about loudness. And so if it's not louder or the same volume as the reference mix, then but I'm usually taking, if I'm working with a mastering engineer and there's budget for that, I'm taking that off. I will usually get both. I'll send a limited mix and one without the limiting on, but I'll keep the clipping on if I am using some sort of clipping.
Is your clipping giving you any volume, or is your clipping literally just clipping so your limiter's not working as hard? So you're using mainly
just all clipping, so it's not limited. So all I'm doing is pulling down the ceiling just to kind of shave off something, just so that I can get it
kicks and snares.
Enough. So clipping is really just there to just kind of shave off some peaks if I need it. I'm not always using it. And then it just lets the limiter work less hard, but I'll leave it on and take the limiter off. Most of the time, master engineers not using my limited mix, but I'll leave the clipping on because it does change how the mix reacts and everything to a limiter. So as it evolves, it becomes part of the sound and everything. I'm not like religious on clippers. It's just a tool that I started using to help get a bit more volume out of it. It's not
everyone wants volume, don't they?
Yeah.
It was trying to get this loudness going crazy, and literally the only way to do it is, well, there's multiple ways, but a clipper does really help with that.
I love transients and everything, and like punchy mixes, and so I'm just like, sometimes it's like, this is just like the antithesis to what we're trying to achieve here. Trying to shave these transients off, and I'm like, I want more transients. I want it to smack on whatever system it's playing on. So
amazing. You mentioned about you, and it was quite interesting actually. And I speak to some mixers, and they're all about a lot of bus processing. I'm talking to you, and you're kind of all about getting those individual elements kind of correct and not trying to fix it as like a group. So when it comes down to then something that's like background vocals, let's say you're working on a mix and it's got 20 or 30 harmonies, let's say, are you individually kind of EQ and compressing like a stack of 20 or 30, or are you going to do that on the bus for that kind of instance?
So in that case, in that case, I am using buses. I'm not utilizing like the main like drums or vocals or keys or guitars bus. But when it does come to vocals, for instance, I've got a mix right now that has the lead vocals, and then they've got different sections of, you know, the backing vocals, like singing different parts and different sections of the songs. I'll group those, put them in their own bus, and
so like chorus harmony, verse harmony, that you'll have them as separate. I see.
So I've got like I've actually got it like I've got the chorus harmony group, and that's got its own separate bus, and then verse harmony group, own separate bus. Most of the time, it really depends on how the track is feeling. If I do feel like there is a bit of build up in track in the individual tracks, I will just kind of grab Pro Q and everything and just notch out a couple of things. If I feel like it needs a bit of compression on the individual channels, I'll do a bit of compression there and then a bit on the group as well. But I'm mainly treating them as like one part, and I will balance them out to kind of, you know, sit right. But then the overall level, I'm treating it as one specific
one group.
It's exactly the same with with the lead vocal. I will chop it up, and actually with most things, but specifically vocals, I will chop it up to individual sections, so verse and chorus vocals. So then I process them slightly differently. And in terms of like automation and stuff, it does change a bit more on how I approach it.
That's good to hear. It's similar to what I do as well, actually, with that kind of stuff with vocals. And I you know, I used to is when I had like a stack of vocals, I used to just, you know, process everything, and then I've started putting the Waves R compressor on every single one individually, just to knock a 1 or 2 dB off individual of every single one, and it just balanced the stereo image just that little bit more. So there's all sorts of ways, but it's interesting the way that you're doing it.
It's so interesting to just kind of see how we all get to, you know, we all get
the end result
completely different ways, and it's just interesting. There is, as you said, there's literally no right or wrong.
It's just
wrong
what you
way
like.
on how to do these things.
Yeah, it depends what day it is.
Some days I'm like, okay, I'll go into the individual channels, and then some days I'm like, I can't be asked. I'm just going, you know, bus compressor on there, a little bit EQ balance on the group. Cool, we'll call it a day.
What about you know, if we touch upon a little bit about like automation, are you doing a lot of kind of riding on the mix bus, upper dB on choruses? Are you doing automation on buses, individual tracks, or drums, that kind of stuff?
The most places I am using a lot of automation in a lot of parts. I haven't, in the last 10 mixes or so, I haven't actually touched the mix bus in terms of pushing a chorus up a dB. And that's maybe credit to the producers and the artists, that the dynamics is built in there already, that I haven't felt the need that it's like lacked energy or something in terms of volume. But I am using automation a lot, volume automation a lot. So for instance, like let's take vocals. There's two different ways of thoughts. There's the pre-gain and then there's the post-gain. And I do use both depending on what I need it to do. So in cases like I will use the pre-gain, like the actual clip gain on Pro Tools, I will use that to kind of level out a vocal. I'll go in and highlight the words and kind of clip gain different words to kind of make my compressor work less if I am using compression. If the vocal's already pretty much compressed, I am still going to kind of clip gain it. But then let's say, per instance, because I've now chopped it up, the vocal into verse, chorus, verse one might be a lot softer because there's a lot less instruments in there. So I will automate that vocal down. I will let you just highlight. I'll have the volume line, automation line underneath. I'll let you highlight it and pull it down by however many dBs I need it to be. And then let's say verse 2, there's a bit more instruments and the vocal's getting lost a bit because it's kind of even. I'll push it up and I'll just play with that level. And that's the same with everything. Let's say there's a snare or something. I need it to kind of just poke out in this chorus versus the next chorus. I'm just going and highlighting and bringing these automations down. I'm not playing too much with like, even though I do have the S1s, I'm not playing too much with fader automation.
I was going to ask you about that. Are you doing a lot of that or not? Or not as much?
I'm honestly just highlighting and bringing down different sections or specific words. I feel like that's easier because I can literally go and highlight it and just drag it down. I know that seems like cheating, but I'm really using the S1s to kind of start off the mix.
Yeah.
For like, I'm using a lot more for like effects sends and everything. So it's great because I grew up in the live sound industry working on like consoles and stuff. So this is why I wanted a pair of these, because it was at home for me. I grew up mixing on faders, where you see like a lot of engineers grew up mixing on like an SSL console and everything.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same, but I grew up on digital consoles. That's showing my age compared to a lot of other people. So I grew up on digital consoles and been able to like flip through different banks and VCAs and spilling tracks. That workflow was very much at home to me. So this is why I love it for starting a mix and just for balancing. It's great because I can see they're touch sensitive. So I can see on the like scribble strips how many dBs or point dBs I'm bringing something down by, which really helps. To kind of I can just lightly touch it and see how much it's coming down by. But for actual like finger automation and stuff like that, I'm not doing that too much. I've got it currently set up now. My left side has got my individual channels, and my right side has got all of my VCAs. So my drums, bass, guitar, keys, vocals, backing vocals, and master bus. So what I can do on the right hand side, I've got all my VCAs. I'll tap, double tap select on whatever VCA it is, and it will spill on the left hand side all those channels there. And what's great about the S1s is that whatever I click on, it jumps to on the screen on Pro Tools. So I'm predominantly I never touch, in the past year, I haven't touched the mix window in Pro Tools. I've literally stayed in the edit window because it makes it so easy. I never have to, look at that. So, there was a mixer. He's now based in LA, Matt Huber, really just gave me the tip on like one of his Instagram stories to like mix on edit window, because you can get all your inserts on there. You can grab the fader if you want to. There's like the little fader knob that you could do. But now, because I have the S1s, it's even better because I never have to touch the mix window, and I can just have everything here and it jumps to where it is on the session. So
no, that's great. I mean, I love the edit window as well. The edit, you can just, like you say, you can just see everything in there. It's just easier. You mentioned VCAs. It's interesting because some mixers, I know they just use buses. They got no VCAs, and I know VCAs are for volume and mutes and stuff. In your workflow, how you mentioned you got the individual tracks, you got the buses. Have you got the buses and then the VCAs are linked to the buses, or how are you using your VCAs? Because I know it's a little bit of not complicated, but there's a lot of confusion. I find people are like, what's a VCA, VS a bus, and all of that sort of stuff. So if you expand on that a little bit.
I'm using the VCAs and how I obviously view VCAs versus like the AUXs in Pro Tools, or we call them buses, AUXs. I guess they're used for different things. I call it an aux if I'm using it for effects. If I'm using it to just root stuff, and that's like the kind of main fader group, then I call it a bus.
Which Pro Tools call as a routing folder. It's everyone's like,
whatever you want to call it, as long as it works for you. So I am still using that. That is part of my core template. The reason why I'm using VCAs currently now is because they basically have all of so take my drum VCA, for instance. It's got all of it's like a group. It's Pro Tools views it as a group, so I can add the tracks that I want to be part of that group. And I'm not using the volume for them. It's literally just to have them on the right hand side of my S1s, and when I can double click it, it will spill it. That's just the only way I was able to get that kind of fast workflow was to use VCAs. You could use folders as well. VCAs just for me was just the easiest one to use. I know some mixers again like using the VCAs and not the buses, and some people don't.
So everyone has a different way, so it's just.
So I'm just using it in a weird way. I'm literally just using it because it's the easiest way to spill stuff on the S1. I wish there was an easier way.
That's cool.
That's all I'm using it for. So
amazing. So now we know, a little bit more about your kind of workflow. One thing that I found you via Instagram, and I checked out your stuff. And first of all, it's a pleasure to be able to do this, from social media, and and that just shows the power of, if this was, back in early 2000s, we probably wouldn't have done this, because I wouldn't have known, who you are.
Probably wouldn't have met, actually, as well.
So it's just so good, the whole kind of social media content creation. And I think content creation in the mixing world, especially with, people like Jason Joshua and, Mix of the Masters, Pure Mix, all of those big kind of mixers, and, there seems to be quite a lot of content creation, coming forward in the mixing world. As you know, we used to be behind the scenes. But my point being is I loved all your kind of content and the way you do all your content creation. And I think anybody listening to this podcast, if you want to be a mixer in 2024, I do think that content creation is key to have a successful, full-time career out of it. So Josh, you do that, how has content creation enabled you to do mixing, make that transition from doing, live sound or, normal job, let's say, to be doing, to be a mixing engineer? So how has that helped you? Have you got management? Do you do it all on your own? All of that kind of stuff. Feel free to expand. Obviously there was a lot there.
That's great.
You could start from the beginning, but how important is content creation for yourself?
I think content creation gets a bad rep because I think we immediately assume it with like YouTubers. And it's not that. And I'll explain why. But I think, again, I wouldn't be able to do what I do if it weren't for social media. If you view social media as this one big networking app, I think it will change how you view, how you view content creation and putting yourself out online and everything. And what I had always been doing social media, like posting stuff about my studio, and the releases that I was working on didn't really have any kind of like direction behind it. I was really just posting stuff and was getting work just through word of mouth, which is a bit inconsistent because you're at the mercy of whenever someone wants to tell someone else about you. You can't really control that. And, as we've seen through COVID, I think has been, we've obviously been using social media for a while, but I think we saw through COVID that the whole industry kind of shifted to this online. How can we collaborate now since we can't be in physical spaces with each other? How can we collaborate online? And, there was a lot of tools and stuff that came out from there, but people started working more and more online with each other. There had been stuff like that before, specifically when I was back in South Africa. All of the artists that I worked with was online through social media. But I think it's just become a lot more prominent now. And so to kind of get to the point, when I moved to the UK, I had always thought about content and stuff like that. But when I moved to the UK, it was pretty much a big shift for me because I'm moving to this new country and I'm an audio engineer and I need to run a business. I need to make money. I sat and asked myself, okay, well, where is this work? Where am I going to get this work coming in? Where is it going to come from? And had the realization that it's not going to come to me. I have to go out and find it. And
very true.
Not just find it.
Yeah.
How do I find the type of work that I actually want to work on, the artists that I want to work with, the style that I want to work on? And I'm not going to give myself all the credit. There is a guy who's pretty much a mentor to me, but he helps a lot of studio pros like us. We're just kind of building an online business and, online remote business, or maybe it could be in person as well. His name is Carl Barner. He's based out in the US and he runs a lot of great courses and masterclasses on just building an online business. I'm not going to get too much into that, but I'll give you a bit of my thoughts and why I think it's important, why it works for me, what I've seen work for me, and kind of the change in people's perception of me as well through doing it. And so, just going back on that, just like the work is not going to come to me. I need to go out and find it. And it's pretty much, the same as any other business. You need to go and find like leads, and the music industry is a bit more personal. It's not about just making a sale. It really is about building relationships and building a network, which is far different from like selling a product.
Can I just emphasize that point about you saying that work isn't going to come to you? And, when I interview a lot of different mixers and there is this kind of misconception, I guess, from newer mixers that I'm going to get a manager and then I'm going to work with Ariana Grande and it's going to be nice and easy.
No.
And it is just the polar opposite. Like, some people get lucky and they get success very quickly. Some people don't get success until 20 years time. I feel like there's always a place for everybody, but I just want to emphasize that was a very important thing what you mentioned there to anybody listening to this episode, that if you just sit all day waiting for that phone to ring, it isn't going to happen. No. And like you say, word of mouth, you may have a friend, you may get lucky and have 3 or 4 months of work, but then what happens when you've completed all that?
Yeah.
Go on, carry on what you're saying.
Carl has this great analogy in terms of like sowing seeds. So if you're constantly building relationships and everything, it's like you said, that you've got this period of 4 months of great work and you're only focusing on that work. What happens when that work finishes and you haven't been putting in the work of meeting people, making relationships? If you're not constantly doing that and sowing these seeds, you're not going to get to the point where you're going to have consistent work coming in. And again, not everyone is going to hire you. And I'll get into how I kind of meet new people and everything. But I think the kind of premise on why I think content is important and why I think a lot of engineers miss the point, and I don't think it's necessarily their own fault. I do think that we shouldn't necessarily follow like the big mixes in this, and I'll tell you why. When someone, let's say you've reached out for someone, or let's say someone has just found your profile by however accident on social media, they visit your profile. They look at whatever you posted, they're going to get a gut feeling about you, and that gut feeling, is that the gut feeling that you want them to have? And what is the gut feeling? We want people to think that, hey, we're good at what we do, we're a great person, and we'd be great to work with. And is the stuff on your profile allowing that? And what's the word? I'm losing my train of thought here. Is it fulfilling that? And obviously we can't control how people view us and how they think about us, but we can sway them in having the right sort of gut feeling about who we are and what we do through what's on our social media profile. And that doesn't just mean posting just anything. It is having a strategy about it, and that strategy could look different for different people depending on what you're trying to go for, what kind of sect of the industry that you're in, whether you're a producer, whether you're a mastering engineer, or a mix engineer. And I think a lot of engineers miss the point of that. Branding and marketing applies the same principles apply to us as how it informs our decisions and what products we're buying. With anyone, just how the human brain works. Branding and marketing informs everything that we do, and it's not tricking people. In some cases, it is. Some companies try and put these. I'm just talking in general. These bold claims and cool benefits of different things. But we're constantly informed through branding and marketing, and you have a personal brand, whether you like it or not. And you're either going to just be at the mercy of it, or you can kind of take control of it. And so for me, kind of got to the point where it was like, really just sit and think, what do I want the gut feeling of people to have for me, and who do I want to work with as well? And is my content serving them and helping inform them and breaking down those barriers in their minds? Is Josh the right person? Is Ed the right person for me to work with? And so I think I see a lot of engineers and producers, are doing content, but I think they're going it in the completely wrong way, because they're not making content for their target audience. If you're a producer, you want to work with artists, not other producers. So posting stuff about gear and plugins and stuff like that, and it's not necessary. If we step back, is an artist that wants to work with you, one, do they understand that? And two, does it resonate with them? If we're being honest, it probably doesn't. And so same with engineers. If we're posting, I think there are times where we can kind of nerd out and about gear and plugins and stuff like that. But
that's why I did this podcast.
And this is a great medium for it. But I don't necessarily think Instagram currently now is the best, is the best place for it. So if you go into my profile right now, I'm hoping that you get a good idea of who I am and what it's like to work with me, as well as, my core values about mixing and working with other people, and then as well as the work that I work on. But I want to showcase it in a different way. It all kind of falls under the banner of communicating the care. I want to show people that I care about the people that I work with and the music that I work on. And hopefully my social media conveys that in the best way possible, And I think we can't necessarily follow the engineers out there. I'm not talking about the top guys. I'm talking about maybe the guys below that. They're getting a lot of work, that are working on a lot of the popular records these days, that are maybe just posting. You go to the profile and they're just posting the artwork that they've worked on. You have to realize that they don't need social media. They're working on so many records right now that, they're just kind of just posting the artwork just for the sake of it. But, someone like me, someone like yourself, we've maybe been privileged to work on some, pretty big records. If we just post the artwork, that's not going to tell anyone anything about us. They go to our profile. I've gone to some engineer's profile, and this is no dig at anyone. I go into the profile and I just see artwork of mixes they've worked on, and there's no picture of them. I don't even know what they look like. So why would I want to work with them unless you've got Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, Dua Lipa, Ed Sheeran as the album artworks on there? It's just going to kind of deter me a little bit, because I'm like, I don't really know much about you. You're not making yourself as approachable as possible. So that's kind of the vision behind why I do content. So I try and not talk about gear. I try and not talk about plugins. I have a lot of engineer friends, like yourself. We've obviously met recently. We're doing this podcast, but I chat on DMs a lot of the time with like a lot of my engineer friends. So we chat gear and stuff like that. And I think that's a great medium for it. But unlike the public forum of, my front facing profile, I don't think it serves that. And so how can I, a lot of the time I've been just kind of recently trying to be a bit more raw and show what it's like to be me. What does my day look like?
But that's what people want. People want to know that you're a nice person, because if they know you're a nice person, they know that you're probably going to be great to work with. Well, you are. Do you know what I mean? So that that goes a lot further than what plugin you're using on a vocal, for example.
I think there is a use case where you can maybe talk about a specific plugin, but talk about it in the way it helped a specific artist's song that you loved working on, rather than, hey, this is my mix bus. It doesn't really serve the same purpose.
It's interesting though, the when you mentioned about as well with the whole, not having, your face on Instagram and it just being artwork. And as we previously mentioned, like, I think there are kind of two things about that, just to go upon a little bit on that, is a lot of the people that as well that are on those hit records, they potentially could be 20 years older than us, for example. So when they were our age, social media wasn't really a thing, but now they have the hit records, they have the connections, and they're with the labels. As what you said, they don't need social media to get work, but anybody that's currently studying university, college, or below 30 or even mid 30, you do need to have social media until you get to that point. And, as I mentioned at the start of the podcast, even people like Jason Joshua, TZO, Leslie Brathwaite, Leslie, who I've interviewed before, he's got a ridiculous amount of, I think he's on 22 Grammy Awards, but he's still doing social media bits, even with 22. So, you got to think, if someone like him's doing social media, maybe not doing it every day, but, you can see his face, he's doing Mix with the Masters, he's got a presence on social media. Then someone with no Grammy Awards, someone with no big name should 100% be doing content creation. So, I just wanted to touch upon that.
I think what people don't understand as well is that if you're starting out, and this is my advice to people starting out, content creation doesn't need to be hectic. It could just be a time lapse of you in the studio, and the background audio is the music of a song that you worked on, or maybe you could just get in front of the camera. And I understand there's an anxiety part to being in front of camera, and trust me, it doesn't go away. It gets easier the more and more you do it. But I think there are easy ways and simple ways, and just conveying thoughts. Maybe you have a thought on something, sit down and record it, and you're going to get, it's not going to be great at the start, but if you constantly get doing it, it's not about having great content. It's really just about putting yourself out there. Like I've got one I think I'm going to post tonight. It's a 7-second video. And it's just a little reminder for people. It's short, it's catchy, engaging. It shows me on the camera and shows a bit of my personality. But it's also conveying a specific message that I want to convey, with a little bit of a marketing thing there. It's not about like, hey, hire me or anything. I'm trying to do it without trying to say hire me or get work in your song. It's how do you communicate that without actually saying it, and how do you say these important things in as little words as possible, because people's attentions is so
10 seconds.
I'm always constantly thinking, how can I have this idea for a video, okay, cool, how can I get it down to like 15 seconds instead of like the 1 minute? I think there is a place for like long form content as well, but like you said, a lot of these guys still have social media, and you can get them. I think a lot of them do. It is a lot more gear based and stuff like that. Again, because they're
not trying to get. They've already got the connections to get people anyway. So
but I still think the social media is great because they're doing other things. Like Jason Joshua's got like the God particle. That's
of course,
come up. His social media helps him
promote that.
So again, that he's using social media to leverage whatever he wants to market, what he wants you to market, and then through that he might be getting people that want to mix. You want him to mix records as well, that maybe never heard of him. Oh, he was on that record. I would love him to mix my single if you can't afford him. If you got unlimited budget. So I think it's really important for anyone that is starting out. Really focus on like a bit of branding, a bit of marketing. Get comfortable with getting yourself out on camera. It doesn't need to be hectic. And just get comfortable with that. And then I would talk on the other thing is actually reaching out to people, which is the even more scarier part than doing the content, to be honest with you. It's actually going to the people that you want to work with, and going from there. So how I generate a lot of we call them leads, I guess. We can call them leads. It's kind of the term that we are. I use Spotify is my lead generator. So what I do is I will make a playlist and I will drop a bunch of songs in there. I'm usually grabbing them from other playlists or maybe artists that I've come across that I really like their music. I add them on there, or pop music that from my portfolio as well. That's kind of the style that I want to work on. I'll put that into that playlist, and that informs the Spotify algorithm. Oh, let's recommend more music like that to them, to whoever, to me. And so that allows me to kind of go through these recommendations and discover these artists. It will recommend artists within a similar category, bracket, monthly listener bracket and stuff like that. I wouldn't recommend reaching out to someone with a million monthly listeners. They're going to be most likely signed to a label, most likely under some sort of management. It's a bit more hoops that you need to jump through. But someone with and I don't think monthly listeners are the be all and end all. I think take that as a case by case basis, because I've got an artist that I work with that have 100,000 monthly listeners, but 2,000 followers on Instagram. It can vary. You can have someone with 100,000 followers on Instagram, but 1,000 monthly listeners, and that informs you in different ways a little bit about them. But using Spotify to kind of just recommend songs to me, and if I like the music, get a good vibe from them on their social media, I'll add them to the playlist, and Spotify keeps on building. I'll spend some time in my week to kind of just build that playlist up, and I spend time every day, literally about an hour and a half, just messaging people, whether that's starting a new conversation with someone or keeping up the current conversations or following up with someone that I maybe haven't connected with in a couple of weeks, just to see how they're doing, or maybe just they've posted something, I can connect with that, respond to their story, or something like that. I'm constantly doing that. I've gotten a lot better at it. I sucked at the start
just practice.
How to start a conversation with someone that doesn't seem salesy, like you're a used car salesman trying to sell them something. It's about having natural conversations, and that's the journey I've been on this past year. How to get better at conversations, natural conversations, show interest in people, not just, hey, I like your music, hire me. It's like, hey, I really liked your song. I like this. I love how those guitars sound in the chorus. I really love how your vocals stand out. It's got a really nice airiness. You got such a power behind your voice. Something specific, something relatable that shows that, one, I've done my research about them. Two, I'm genuinely interested in them and the music. I like it. Even if they were to never hire me, I would still listen to their music. And really just taking an interest in them.
Do you find you get a lot of work via doing that? Do you find that has helped?
100% of my work has come through DMs.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, that's great to hear. I mean, that just shows you that's 2024 for you.
100%
and working hard.
Has come through. All of my work has come through social media. That is, and I'm not saying I'm not as like big as some of the. I definitely would love to work on more and more records, but just to show you the journey.
But it's a process. It's a process. You will eventually.
From moving to the UK to where I am now, every single record that I worked on last year came through social media.
Wow.
And I haven't met a single artist in the last year. I haven't met a single artist in real life that I've worked with. They've all been just online.
That's great.
We've had an enjoyable process, and that's a completely different conversation. How to make it a great experience and client experience and stuff like that. But 100% of my work through social media. I'd say 95% of the work. No, let's go a bit lower. Let's say about 80% of the work has been through actually starting conversations and meeting new people. And then the other 20% has been a mixture between word of mouth and people finding me on social media through my content, through mutual friends that they might be following. I worked on a record for a friend. Oh, I really loved how that record sounded. Who mixed this or who produced this? Oh,
name gets around. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll probably get, repetitive work from that. And then you build up a client list of, let's say, 30 people, and there you go. You've got a year's worth of work, of just, do you find as well that with a lot of these people you're messaging with the mixes, are you adding any kind of production to them as well? Like what kind of state are a lot of the mixes, and do you do any production that you're adding it within the mixes? I know some people do a little bit, but yeah.
I'm not doing any production. Okay. So it's literally just mixing. In some cases, I might do the master as well. And then in a lot of the cases as well, I am basically pitching to people that my main thing is to really just speed up their workflow and reduce the kind of friction that can come when releasing a record. So what that means is I will handle, if I'm bringing, they haven't got a mastering engineer on, I will usually, in the price that I'm quoting them, I will include a master engineer that I work with right inside that, and then I will handle the payment and all files and everything. And all they do is, we obviously have the revisions and notes and that, but at the end of it, they get a final master that they can just upload to DistroKid or whatever distribution system
which is what they want, which is that's what they're after. Yeah. If you are mastering, are you keeping your limiter on? Is that your mastering chain? What you said earlier, or are you doing a whole separate thing for mastering? Or is it
I'm doing a whole. I will generally keep it the same.
Yeah.
But what I'll do is I'll bypass the limiter. Sorry.
Yeah.
Bounce the track out, open it in a completely different session. I'll have like a master Pro Tools session which got all my masters in. I'll drop that track in there.
Yeah.
And then it does. Before I do that, I'll actually pop it into RX. Isotope RX, and I'll do a bit of quality control, get rid of clicks and pops. I'm noticing that even though it's we talk about objectivity and a perspective thing, I'm noticing that I can get better results versus just having the master in the session and bouncing out, and that's what they get. It's easier to just bounce it out, do a bit of quality control. It's a completely different mind. Your mind works slightly differently, and then dropping it back into Pro Tools in a completely different session. I just have the two, the mix.
The stereo,
and that allows me to put like fades as well. And then I'll copy my limiter settings, but a lot of the time I will look and I'll do maybe a bit of a tonal change if I feel like it needs it. But in a lot of the cases, I'm just seeing, can I get it a little bit louder than my mix
with
was?
clippers and limiters. Yeah.
But a lot of the records I am now, I'm trying to get a mastering engineer in. So when I am quoting, we're talking about a rate for the project, I am talking about
with that included.
And it just, if I could do every record not mastering and just have a mastering engineer on, I would, because it makes my life so much easier. It really does elevate the record.
Of course, different perspective. But it was interesting what you said about the RX. I know there'll be questions about that, because people will ask, oh well, what is he doing in the RX and the 2-track? You mentioned about you kind of doing the declicks. Are you not kind of doing that in the mix itself, or what problems are you solving? I know you, as you said, you prefer to send it off to a mastering engineer, but if you are mastering it, you mentioned about the RX and you're solving problems within that. People are going to want to know, what problems are you solving usually, and what kind of stuff are you doing?
So I'm not solving any like big issues before people start getting a bit worried. But there is a massive perspective change. What we don't understand when we have the mix in the mix session, I've got stuff with like clicks and pops that I'm removing with the isotope modules and audio suite on Pro Tools. I am removing that, but our brains and our ears are such funny, I guess, parts, because they get used to something very quickly, and you cannot. Our brains and ears almost kind of like glaze over certain things, and we can't hear them. Whereas I bounce that track out, put it into Isotope RX. It's almost like a shift in my brain. I'm hearing completely different things. It'd be difficult as well. I'd be like, I want to go back and change something in that mix, but I've got to make that was the mix that the artist approved, regardless of whether now I hear it, I want to change this and that. That's what they approved. We're going with that.
Yeah,
it's a completely different mindset. I will go in and I'm listening clearly for like, I'll do a pass where I'm clearly listening for like any issues and stuff like that. If there is a big issue, I'll go back into the session and sort that out. But usually there's something like, there might be like a little click in a specific area that I wouldn't have heard if I was in the actual Pro Tools mix session.
It's interesting.
It's very interesting how your brain works with that, where it's like, I wouldn't have noticed that. And people might be worried about that, but mastering engineers are doing this all the time. Like my mastering engineer that I work with, my mastering engineer that I work with, his name is Jack. He won't maybe tell me, but he is doing that. A lot of the master engineers that I talk to, they're using RX all the time. They're taking out clicks and pops. It's not destroying the song, but it can be distracting if someone does notice it. But we can't notice because we've been so zoned in for so long. We don't notice it. And so that's almost like my advice for, as well, we can pivot into this. My advice for producers that maybe don't have the budget, working with artists that maybe don't have the budget to bring in a mix engineer. I see so many producers have sent me like mixes and stuff to have a listen to. Be like, hey, where do I go from this? And I get sent it, and it's like mix version 19. And I'm like, you've just been going around in circles, And a lot of the time it is because I understand it's a time thing, but a lot of the time it's because they're mixing in the actual production session. Whereas I think you would benefit from committing to what you have there, bouncing everything out. Even if it's bouncing out the instrument groups, like the group stems, bouncing that out into another session, I guarantee you that your perspective will change, because now that those sounds are committed, you'll have a completely different, how can I make this work with the stuff that I have? And that's this exact same...
It's the perspective of it, isn't it?
Perspective that I have, because I'm getting stuff wet, with all the effects on. It's like, okay, well, what can I do to get to the artist vision with what I currently have? This is all I have. How do I make it work? And, as engineers, we're problem solvers. How do I solve that problem in getting what they want with what I have? And so by bouncing that out into a new session, you are now forced. You can't go back to that keyboard sound that you want to change now. And that's the reason why you're constantly chasing your tail, because, you're in the production session. You've got a production mindset. Bouncing it out into a mix session, you might not get it to where a separate mix engineer might be, but I guarantee that it will be completely different than if you try to mix it in the production session. It's a completely different mindset.
It's interesting that and like you say, it does come down to budgets. I mean, there's a lot of, and well, I think it stems from artists not knowing what a mixing engineer is, or you know, if I speak to any artist, you know, they'll book a producer to produce the track and they just expect it to be done at the end. What's a mix engineer? What's a mastering engineer? So really it's up to the producer to be like, well, that's the fee or with a mixer included, or this is my fee, but mixing is going to be. But I feel like, you know, if you're working with, let's say, Dua Lipa, that's kind of obvious because you've got management labels that are saying that needs to go to that person. But with a lot of independent artists, I think there's a lot of misleading kind of, they expect a radio ready record from whoever they go to work on the track with. They miss that point. So, you know, I'm up against that sometimes, trying to get the, you know, the budgets in place. Well, actually, you know, it's this amount, this needs to be done for this to go on to the next, but trying to say that can be a bit tricky, I find.
And I think I think this is important here, where social media comes into play. Okay, well, how can you use your social media as a mix engineer to convince artists and producers why they need you? Because if you're just posting gear and stuff like that, no one's ever going to hire, but they don't know that they need you. So how can you communicate to them that they need you on their team, that their lives and their music would be so much better with you on it? And so that's, you know, that's the importance. I'm always trying to think, how can I communicate to a lot of my time? I am trying to connect a lot more with producers, because producers are working with a lot more artists. And so there's a lot more opportunities with one producer for me to kind of come alongside them, become friends with them, and really help them. My big thing is really just helping them focus on what they're good at. I find that a lot of producers, when they get to the mix stage, they kind of dread it, to be honest with you. Whether they like to admit it or not, they get to the mix stage and they are struggling a bit because they've kind of lost all that perspective. And so I like to come alongside them and really just, you know, say, I'm here to help speed up workflow. You can start production a lot more songs. If I'm mixing your songs, you have more time to focus on producing songs which you love. It's almost like the game of starters and finishes. Some people are really great starters, you know, and some people are really great finishers. I don't think you can really be both at the same time. And I understand that sometimes you have to be both. That's cool. But it's really communicating to people why are you important. And I still think, you know, the mixing engineer is still important today. You know, in the whole world of like as well AI coming out and everything, I still think the role of the mastering engineer is still very important. You know, you got these AI mastering things. I've had artists that have worked on with the AI mastering, but they don't really know what's happening there. You know, they don't. They're just kind of they're putting it in the system, and it's pushing out a loud master. But again, stuff like the quality control, stuff that a mastering engineer would have the perspective to see, or kind of just, hey, what's the vibe that we're going for here? What is getting in the way of that? And AI can't do that yet. And that human objectivity and perspective, I still think is important at every stage. But as well with the mastering engineer, I still think, you know, there's obviously a different level. Like, you know, the lower ticket stuff, I think, you know, are going to go for the AI mastering. But I think for the ones that really want to see their music flourish and be the best it can be, to really understand the importance of all these different stages. It's not just people wanting to make money off you. There's people out
quality.
there. There's people out there that care about you and your music. You just have to find them. And
via social media.
Engineers and producers, are you that person? How are you telling people about you? They're not going to come to you. You have to go to them.
Love it.
And tell them, hey, I'm the right fit for you. And again, you might think on that content thing about people's guts feelings about you. I think one thing we also have to realize, we might feel like we might be the right fit for someone, but someone might not feel that we're the right fit for them. And that's also there's the other side of that. Cool. I feel like I could do a great work for this artist, but if they don't feel you're the right vibe, that's cool. And we've got to remember that there's 30,000 tracks being uploaded to Spotify every day.
So much.
There's a lot of work out there.
You just got to find it.
You've just got to go out. You've got to go out and find it. You need to find different ways on how to get in front of people's faces, how to find people. and just be genuine about what you do and the work that you do, and that you care about them.
Love it.
And I think the rest will be history, So
amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. But before we finish, there is one question I always ask, and that is, what 3 things do you know now that you wish you knew when you first started out?
Oh, that's a good one. The first thing that I know now, that I wish I would have known, how much work you have to put in and how difficult it would be. It's not an easy industry to be in. You need to have the real grit and determination to go at it every single day. And there's days where you might feel like you don't want to do it. So I wish I had known how much work you need to put in. And if you really want it, you're going to put the work in. Yeah. And I think if you keep putting the work in, it's almost virtually impossible to not fail. Number 2 would be,
hard question.
Number two would be the importance of relationships. We're all human beings doing this, and you've got to approach people like human beings, and how to interact with people in the right way, I think is great. Being great at communication, that's still under the number 2 point. Relationships and communication is great.
Really good, the one you're saying. Yeah.
And I got to think about this number 3.
Number 3, everyone's always like, don't know what to say.
So we've got how much hard work it would be, relationships and communication, and I think number 3 would be, I'm really going back for. I've got a few options that I would think. I think it's just the
Take your time.
It's great because it edits this out, so it can get rid of this. Or make it look like you can make the editing look like it came off the top of my head. Yeah. So the hard work and relationships and communication, and I think really waking up every day wanting, how can I get that little bit better every single day?
Amazing.
Literally waking up every single day. How can I keep pushing the boundaries and the barriers?
Self-improving.
Of what is possible. Yeah. I think it's, the sky is the limit. I wake up every single day, and there's days where I don't feel like doing it. Don't get me wrong. There's days where I'm just like, I don't know why I'm doing this. But showing up every single day and being committed to just putting one foot in front of the other, of just constantly getting better and better. How can I be better today than I was yesterday at everything that I'm doing? To summarize for people, I wish I knew how much hard work it would be, to communication and relationships, and 3, being committed to constantly getting that little bit better every single day.
Amazing. Well, Josh, thank you so much for coming on to this episode. How can our listeners book you for a mix if they wish? What's the best way to contact you on? And
you can just literally find me on Instagram. My Instagram is at Josh J Riley, and you can send me a message anytime. I would just love to, even if we don't end up working together, I would just love to meet you and see how music is going for you. And
amazing.
Whether you're an artist or producer, I would love to see how I could help you, how we can make some magic happen together. Thanks, Ed, for having me on this. I felt like I spoke quite a bit
This is exactly what I wanted.
Okay.
It's great.
I was in the back of my head, I was like, I should ask Ed some couple questions, but maybe he just wanted me to do all the talking. And
I love it. And for all the listeners listening, I will be adding all of Josh's social media links, website in the description below. So please make sure that you check out the description on this podcast episode as well to book Josh. But Josh, thank you so much.
Ed, thank you so much for having me. It's been great fun. Can't wait for this to come out. And hopefully I didn't ramble on. Hopefully people find some value in some of the stuff I said.
It was amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you so much.